Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nishay from NishaySnow.com. Welcome. Thank you for joining me for another episode in this studio. I have a great guest today, Nicole Crowder, who is an upholsterer and also a furniture designer. So I'm really excited to tell you guys about her story. Before I begin, of course, a couple of housekeeping things. If you have not already, please do me a solid and head on over to iTunes or your Apple Podcast app. And if you could give me 5 stars, that would be amazing for a rating. It really, really helps the show. If you're listening on Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever their rating system is, if you could leave me something or just like it, that'll be great. And of course, for those of you listening to you on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button, and that just helps the podcast get out. And thank you to everyone who's shared an episode. Really, really appreciate it. I can't tell you how much that means to me. So thank you for doing that. And of course, another way you could support the podcast if you're into natural beauty. SW Basics is amazing. If you haven't checked them out, definitely do that. Go to nishaysnow.com/SW Basics. And if you see something you like over there, just put in the code SNOW, my last name, SNOW, and you'll get a 15% discount. So you guys know I'm all about that all natural life. I'm not 100%, but really I'm trying to get better. And so that leads me to my guest, Nicole Crowder. So you probably read the title of this episode, Growing an Upholstery Business Through Intentional Entrepreneurship. And you're like, what is that? Or some people might already know. Because even I feel like last week's guest, Danielle, also tries to live an intentional lifestyle that includes just not only her personal lifestyle, but work. But that's with the same with my guest today, Nicole. And you're probably like, okay, what is this whole intentional entrepreneurship, intentional living? And I'll just take a line from Wikipedia just to kind of break down at least the intentional living. And it says, intentional living is any lifestyle based on an individual or group's conscious attempts to live according to their values and beliefs. And Nicole discusses how she actually years ago tried to start an upholstery business. It didn't work out. She went back to work, and then now this is her second attempt. But because she was more intentional about it and did things a little bit differently, she has now gained success for her business, which is great. It reminds me a little bit of episode 36 with Hadia, who's a jewelry designer, and it was the same for her. She started her business at one point in her life, and it just didn't work. But then from those lessons learned, she now has started her business and is working full time doing it again. So definitely, if you haven't listened to that episode, just look for 36 or go to nishaysnow.com 36 and you can listen to it there. But back to Nicole. One quote that I pulled out is, she said, I wanted to just be more intentional about the lifestyle and the work I wanted to do for myself. And so we talk a little bit about that, and of course, like her journey in getting there. And it's just really interesting from her working at Essence Magazine to AARP, and just how her just career has shifted over time. And now she's, using all the skills that she's learned from all these different places to do the thing that she loves. So I think you guys will really be inspired by her story and just kind of want to live that intentional lifestyle yourself too. So anywho, I will just get right into it. Show notes for this episode, of course, are nishasnow.com/62. And I'd love to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed the episode, not only tell me, but, go visit Nicole on social media and just, tell her good job. It's always good to hear that. All right, let's do this. Hello, everyone. I have Nicole on the show. Welcome, Nicole.
You so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, your work is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was like, oh my God, I gotta get her on the show. I got it.
Hey.
But before we kind of get into like how you really got started and like what you're doing now with it, I just want to take the users back. Like, what's your background? Like, just tell the users just a little bit about you.
Yeah. So I grew up like a military kid, basically. My parents were both in the army, and so I was born overseas, and we just traveled a bit every 3 years as my dad was restationed, and we ended up in Minnesota, which is where my family has been living for the past, I would say, almost 20 years.
Mm,
And from there, I went off to college and I was really involved in art. And so I was getting into art and photography and design and did an internship with Essence Magazine right before I
mm,
graduated from college. And that introduced me to the world of photo editing. I really didn't even know that was a career field at the time. And
mm-hmm,
so after I graduated college, I was kind of like, I think I want to get into photo editing because I really enjoyed the idea of um, packaging something and figuring out how a magazine was created and who made those editorial decisions about which photographs ran, which stories ran,
mm.
who styled the shoots. It just became this passion. And my roommate in college, she was very patient because I had tons and tons of magazines, just stacks in there, and I was ripping them out and putting them on the wall. And I would always circle the photographer credit in the margin just to kind of build up my Rolodex of photographers. And so that started me on my 10-year career essentially of being a photo editor. And I
Mm,
moved from New York to DC and I started working with a company called AARP, which
mm-hmm,
services the 50 plus population more or less. And
mm-hmm,
I was on the newspaper there, and then I moved over to the magazine where I was working with um, hiring photographers to shoot food and travel and celebrity portraiture photographs. And then from there was a little bit of a break, which I can back up and do because I did jump into upholstery briefly then. And then when I came back to photo editing, I went to the Washington Post. And then from the Post, I jumped over to California, went all the way to the West
Oh
Coast.
wow, yeah.
I know it's super nonlinear. And I was working with Netflix. But
Mm,
throughout this time, this 10-year period, I discovered upholstery, and the seed just grew and became this labor of love, and it brought me back to DC, and ultimately starting this business that I have now.
mm. So with the upholstery, for example, how do you even start to like get into it? Like, were you someone who like loved to go to thrift stores and then you would see like these, like chairs or sofas and you would be like, and you just kind
Hmm.
of had this vision, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
how did it even like the love for it even start?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love thrifting, going to antiques markets. My girlfriends and I, on the summers especially, we just love going out to these huge markets and just shopping around for, bargains for little pieces here and there. I love collecting and decorating my space with found objects and going on
Mm,
Craigslist and sourcing. And in 2011, 12, I had started photographing for apartment therapy, doing house tours. And
mm,
just going in and out of people's homes, you see their different decor styles. And I was noticing I was just drawn to chairs and the details of those. Hadn't really thought about the upholstery itself and being someone who could do that. It was just like, wow, this chair is really gorgeous and the fabric is fabulous and the frame is beautiful. And one of the homes that I was photographing, the woman who lived there, she was telling me about this awesome store in Baltimore or just outside of Baltimore in a area called Bel Air that
mm.
sold a bunch of mid-century style chairs. And so I had gone out there and it was just like this wide open, like Mecca. It was incredible. And so I bought about 5 chairs, brought them back to I was living with one of my friends at the time, brought them back to the home and just started to reupholster them. And
Mm.
she was like, "Girl, we have no space for all of this. What's going
All
on?
these years.
Like, what is happening?" She's like, "I know you like to thrift, but this is a lot." And so from there, I was just learning the techniques of upholstery through trial and error and a lot of YouTube,
Mm.
but
Okay, yeah,
definitely,
I was like, did you take any classes or was it, yeah, like YouTube, Google, and then just
yeah.
figuring it out? Yeah.
That's what it was. It was definitely hands-on, a lot of YouTube videos. When redid the first set of chairs, when I think about them now, they look pretty terrible. But there was a woman who came by and wanted to buy them, and she was asking
Mm.
if I had a showroom, and I was like, "Oh no, I just, this is my living room, and I work full
Right.
time. Like this is it." And she was
Right.
saying, "Well, maybe I have a few clients." She turned out to be an interior designer, and she was like, "I have a few clients, so maybe you could hone this because this is not just like a hobby, it's a niche."
Mm.
And from there, I just was on YouTube all the time. I was up on Craigslist at 3 o'clock in the morning, right before I had to go into the office, and looking for chairs, bookmarking the ones that I really wanted, bookmarking a bunch of websites. And eventually, it was just this big collection of various types of furniture. And all of it was just learning through a lot of trial and error, so many mistakes, and learning how to really slow my hand down because I'm used to working pretty quickly on whatever project I'm doing. But with upholstery, it definitely forces you to slow down a bit more and pay attention to details and to structure because fabric can be a little forgiving, but
Mm-hmm.
it could also one wrong cut and you would have to restart a piece over.
Oof. Yeah, and
Yeah,
I guess it depends on how much fabric you have too. So, let's say if
exactly.
you don't have a lot of excess, you have to really make sure you get it right the first
Yeah.
time, right?
That's definitely what I was doing. That old adage of like measure twice, cut once was super
Right.
critical because my gosh, I can't tell you how much fabric I underbought or just, completely messed up while I was first starting out.
Mm. And then for you, so right now, do you still have a full-time job or are you doing this full time?
This is full time. 2016, I left my full time position when I was with Netflix. And that was when I made the decision that I wanted to just be more intentional about the lifestyle and the work that I wanted to do for myself. I knew that I was
Mm.
tired of working in the office setting and that
Mm-hmm.
that sort of repetition, while I loved the work, being a photo editor, working in the editorial field, I was just sort of I was getting a little bored, I think, and I wanted to start working with my hands. And so when I left that job, my intention when I came back to DC was to just relaunch my upholstery business and do it in a way that I would thrive. And that meant
Mm.
creating structure for myself around what kind of work I wanted to do, price points, where I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to even live, how I wanted to work, whether that meant like keeping studio hours 9 to 5, or not working on the weekends. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was just much more intentional. Like this is going to be my work here. This isn't just like a side project. And so I officially started January 31st of 2017.
Wow.
I know, and it's been fantastic ever since.
So how did that look like this season on the podcast? One question I'm asking folks, because I always get this from people, especially people who are transitioning from like a
Mhm.
9 to 5 job, is like, when you do that, you're giving up like the health insurance and like
Right.
your
Yeah.
like the retirement that's set up. So how did you kind of even go about like figuring all that out? I think that's what makes it
Yes.
really scary for people.
Yeah, I think honestly, and I'll backtrack just a little bit. What brought me to this point now was all the mistakes that I made when I first launched or tried to launch my upholstery business in 2013.
Mm.
I had taken a brief break from my full time job at the time, and I was like, hey, I'm going to go off into upholstery and do this. And I had no insurance for my furniture, I had no health insurance for myself.
Mm.
I I didn't have structure set up in terms of how I wanted to work. So I was up at 6 a.m. working on chairs until 1 a.m. And I was
Mm.
also commuting between Baltimore and DC because I thought, oh, it'll be cheaper to live in Baltimore. But most, if not all, of my clients were in DC. So it was a lot of work on myself. and my just mental health and physical health. And so when I started upholstery last year and knew that I wanted to do this full time, I sat myself down and I said, if we're going to do this, let's do this the right way and let's
Mm-hmm.
invest in the right places. And that meant, yeah, I would have to get my own health insurance. And so I researched a bunch of health insurance options. And Medicaid was also an option just because I was like, I'm starting at this sort of base level with my income and trying to figure out what I can afford. And then when I was able to get into those, some more personalized healthcare plans, those were options that I pursued. But that was critical. Even though I feel like I'm in relatively good health, I
Mm-hmm.
also am working with heavy pieces of furniture. I'm working with nails and staples, and so anything could happen, and I just wanted to make sure that I was covered in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of research too, with making sure that my furniture was insured since I'm working out of my home currently. And I use Geico for my auto insurance. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
able to use them for my renter's insurance, for my business insurance. But those were things that I wanted to make sure I set up because I want this to be legitimate and I want to be protected. And while the creative aspect is fun, and that's what I really want to focus on, being realistic about the sustainability of this, I had to make some decisions, regarding, all right, how are we really going to get these tent posts up so that going forward, I have the whole structure that's built and that's solid. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I hope that sort of answers that a little bit.
Yeah, no, because I was even talking to someone else and they were saying like Cobra was very expensive. And then I
Hmm.
think they, at the time, I forgot what year it was, they went with Obamacare because at that time it was a lot
Right.
less expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, so no, I think that's good too. And I think like even like just retirement too for people is just
Oof.
like
That's
a
like,
whole other.
yeah, that's like the next phase I'm thinking. And all those years that I worked at AARP, I still have so many questions now about how to set up my own retirement plans and savings plans and 401k. And so I definitely know that I need to touch base with a financial planner, um,
Mhm.
or advisor and talk about my options just because with entrepreneurship, even though, money is a huge focus, it's not my strength, honestly.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
I,
nobody's really unless you're in
yeah.
it.
So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, how can I invest and really get some better information? And a wonderful friend of mine, her name is Keela, and she started an incredible business called Little Fish Accounting this year, which I was
Hmm.
like, hallelujah, because she works with small business owners, mostly of color, who are in creative industries to help them with their
Mm.
bookkeeping, their taxes, accounting, all of those things, whether it's yearly, quarterly taxes. And she just came at a great time because I wanted to get more knowledgeable about how to take care of my accounting and set up those structures. So she's been really valuable in terms of helping me with that. And now I'm trying to figure out longevity and sustainability. So retirement savings and meeting and sitting down with someone who is looking at all these numbers that I have and giving me
Hmm.
hard truth is going to be my next focus. And I'm a
Right.
little nervous to do it, but I know it's definitely necessary to do. So that's my
No,
next.
yeah. I'll make sure, like, if you give me her link and information, I'll make sure to add that to the show notes too.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, absolutely.
And then so you start this business, right? And it's like, there's always like all this excitement, but then it's like, oh my God, I gotta make money, I gotta live off
Right.
of this.
Yeah.
So how did you like what did you decide were going to be your main streams of income?
Mm, such a good question. I wanted to produce my own designs
Mm,
and sell those on my websites, and ideally like through a showroom where people could come and view them in person and feel them and sit on them. And then also, my dream has been to work with hotels, like boutique hotels
ooh,
and
yeah.
restaurants, and like redesign either their lobby spaces, the individual rooms, just to come up with like a collection that was unique to them. And boutique hotel design has been super popular for many years. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like there's such a unique quality to doing something on a smaller scale, but um, where you can really put your signature on it, and it's not just like a bunch of mass produced furniture, but it's like individual
Mm-hmm.
individually designed pieces. And I wanted to do a little bit of residential client work when I first started, but when I first was doing upholstery, a big snag was just negotiating, with people and trying not to lowball myself when it came to wanting to work with, everyday homeowners and renters, but meet them like, where they were. So
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure out, have this balance between residential and commercial work while also selling my own individual designs. And the spectrum has been more residential work, I would say. And that's been nice. And that's definitely helped me to sustain this livelihood and help pay the bills. But sometimes I feel more like just the labor when I'm doing that particular kind of work, as opposed to, sitting down and dreaming up these really fantastic pieces of furniture, chairs or ottomans or benches or chaise lounges, and then producing my own work. And so it's interesting that, we're talking at this time because I feel like I am in that transition phase of where I'm trying to dial back or maybe push away from the residential work and really focus on the commercial clients and getting out my own pieces, because that is what resonates with me more. And I see that resonating with my audience more when I am producing my own furniture. There's just
Mm-hmm.
the traction is there. And a girlfriend of mine, because I was talking to her recently, I was like, yeah, I just haven't had the time to do my own work because of all the other client work. And she was like, you have to be really intentional and say,
Right. Make that
this
time.
is
Mm-hmm.
exactly, make that time to focus on your pieces. And so that's what I'm hoping to do, or not hoping, but I definitely will be doing in the next few months here. Is I've already got a bunch of sketches, and people are so generous about donating chairs that I have a ton of chairs that have, someone has given me the coordinates of where they are on the street, and I'll go and pick it up. And so they're sitting. I'm looking at them right now on my balcony. So I'll be rolling out my own designs within this year for sure.
Oh, that's amazing because
Yeah.
like even when I look at your chairs, like I don't know about you, but I feel like there are a ton of co-working and really small boutique event spaces popping up in this area.
Oh,
And
totally.
I mean, a billion. I was like, I didn't even know we needed that many, but
I
clearly
know. There
I'm
is like it is wild out here. They have just sprouted. Every quadrant has, 10,
right. I'm
20.
like, wow. But I could even
Yeah.
see, your stuff in there. And then I remember talking to someone else and they were God, I forgot which interview it was. It's escaping my brain, but they were saying like, artists can like get into even like the big hotels too, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times they want to make sure they're getting kind of local artists and local designers their stuff in their hotels, and so
Exactly.
there's so much opportunity there.
That's the thing. And when I initially was thinking about that, it felt a little intimidating because you're like, well, who do I approach? And, is this hotel, this sort of massive entity going to be open to a little designer like myself wanting to come and work with them? But you would be so amazed, putting together a
Hmm.
really cohesive, thoughtful pitch with, providing your style, how open and receptive hotels are, because they are also craving that uniqueness, that individuality, because
Right.
they're, competing in a large pool as well of other hotels and other, not even just hotels, but like B&B spaces. So I found that to be really wonderful and welcoming, and so it's taken the intimidation from me out of the process, and now I can send an email and be like, hey, my name is Nicole. I do such and such. I would like to do such and such for you, and
Hmm.
it just feels less um, like overwhelming, I should say, but really exciting.
And then as a designer, there is something freeing. Like my background is like graphic and web design. I don't really do it
Mm.
anymore.
Hmm.
But the reason is because like everybody will come to my site and they're like, "Oh my God, can you do my site?" And I'm like, "Well," because with my
Right.
because with my site,
Hello.
I'm like, I could do whatever I wanted, right? Like
Right.
there's no limit to what you could do. But then
Exactly.
when you're doing someone else's like creation and vision, it's
Hmm.
like it's not the same. Sometimes people don't get that, but it's not the same.
Exactly. And yeah, and that goes back a little bit to excuse me, the residential client aspect, where some people will reach out and they'll say, "Hey, I love your style. I love the funky prints you use. I have this piece that's been in my home, for 5 years or whatever. I'd love for you to do some magic on that. I'd love to collaborate with you. And they're really open to design ideas and aesthetics. And that's good because even though it's a piece for them, I can still, sort of dip into the the designer in me and show
Mm-hmm.
them something that they may not have considered. And a lot of times it is kind of the opposite, where someone says, "Hey, I have this piece. I want it done in just like, blue velvet or blue linen." And I can do all that stuff all day long, in my
Right.
sleep. But it's sort of like that toggle between taking on work that you can really put your stamp on and get into, and that feels satisfying for both parties. And there's other parts where you're like, yes, I can do this, but you just feel a little bit more like the the labor, I guess, just the
Mm-hmm.
hands, that are working, and it's just like you're checking a box in that regard.
Yeah, and I've seen on Instagram too, especially people who do like kind of like those wood pieces that go on the wall. Like a lot of people are going towards, like, I remember, I think it was like a girl in a saw or something, but they would
Mm.
just be like, every Sunday, they're like, these are my pieces. These are the
Right?
prices.
This is it.
There are no custom. It's
Okay.
like, hopefully one of them will fit in your home.
Exactly, exactly. And that's like an interesting conversation that's happening in the furniture industry right now too, is these proliferation of custom furniture design websites. Or like I'm trying to think of one, like an article, for example, which I used a few years ago to buy a sofa. And, you can customize the legs you want. In a lot of
Oh
cases, you can
yeah.
customize the frame. And designers are trying to build out these places where they can scale a bit more, but then
Mm.
create like a more customized options for, what do they call it? I'm blanking on this word right now. It's going to come back to me. People with a little more like dispensable income or disposable income, I should say.
Oh yeah.
And so, and the turnaround time is faster too. So you can, design
Mm.
a sofa for yourself online with about 30 different permutations, and you can have it delivered within a week or two. And then,
Mm-hmm.
Amazon also has their furniture design arm, and that stuff can be turned around within a day.
Mm.
So custom stuff is becoming more popular. There's just like a
Mm-hmm.
drive that's there, which I appreciate the custom aspect. I don't know if I appreciate so much of like the almost like a box style. It almost feels like
Mm-hmm.
it's not as bespoke or individual in terms of how many fabric options you can have, but it's like here's a frame that you can choose from, and then here's like three or four color palettes that you can choose from within that. And with my work, I really want it to be you're not going to find this piece anywhere else in the world.
Anywhere.
It's
Right.
not going to exist in any other way. And I really
Yeah.
like working that way as opposed to churning out multiples of the same thing.
Yeah, and I feel like at that point too, then you are really marketing to more people with more disposable income, like you were saying, because if you go too low, you're either breaking even and or
Right.
losing money, and most people with disposable income are willing to pay a higher price for one of a kind pieces. Like it's like
Exactly.
paintings, right? And so it's like
Exactly.
finding that audience. Yeah.
It's just like,
Mhm.
woo, it's mine. No one else has this. And, I'm trying to work in that balance of I don't want to be an exclusive furniture designer upholsterer where only a certain number of people or a certain type of person can work with me. That's not it. I would love to be able to work with a cross section of people because I feel like
Mm.
everyone, should have access to and be able to have beautiful pieces in their home that speak to
Mhm.
their aesthetic and their personality and all that. And so that's why I kind of have a couple of tiers right now for the client work that I'm doing and for the price points. Because as a consumer, as someone who also likes to decorate and bring in new pieces, I had that same mindset. I'm super happy to
Mhm.
invest in quality pieces. And then other areas, I'm like, I maybe can DIY that or find it someplace else just a little bit cheaper. I'm okay with a knockoff here and there, but some things that are like really special, I
Mhm.
am happy to invest in.
But I think that people who aren't able to afford that higher price point, I feel like you're able to reach them with your classes, which we haven't talked about
Yes.
yet. But you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So it's like, okay, like maybe and I'm just making up a price. I don't know how much it is, but you're
Hmm.
like, maybe a $2,000 chair isn't in my budget. But then I feel like your classes are like, well, if that's not in your budget, you could actually maybe do it yourself.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And that's you're spot on. The upholstery workshops sort of were born out of this two-pronged approach where giving people um, basic skills and approach and introductions to upholstery and trying to demystify how intimidating it might seem as a process, and
Mm-hmm.
equipping you with the power to take on this work, have a completed piece, and then be empowered to hopefully do other pieces if you have them at home. So that if you're finding something on Craigslist and you really love the piece, but you don't like the fabric, you don't have to pass up on that piece because you're like, oh, girl, that's just cosmetic. I can fix that myself. And that saves
Mm-hmm.
you some money and some time from seeking out an upholsterer and going with the back and forth negotiations, but also hoping to create some community around it because I love engaging with
Yeah.
people, seeing people, in real life. I work by myself most of the time, so when I have the opportunity to be among others, whether it's in a creative capacity or just hanging out socially, it's really really fun for me. And so when I first started the
Mm-hmm.
classes, it was to try and do that, and I'm so grateful that the classes have done because the classes skew more so towards women, but it's such a cross section of women. I've had
Mm.
all kinds of ages and backgrounds, and people get together for those 3 hours, and they're just like they're gelling. And there's been so
Right.
many connections, have that come from that as well. Some folks were like, "Oh, two ladies actually in my last class that I taught last Sunday are math tutors." And
Oh
so they
wow.
were like, and they live across the street from each other. So it's like, oh my gosh, let's like hang out and get dinner sometime. But it's just been it's been really rewarding to do those workshops. And at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I'm trying to figure out, or in trying to figure out how to make them a more immersive experience that
Mm-hmm.
could just be a little bit longer. I've decided to do an upholstery retreat. So it'll be the first retreat
I
this
saw
fall.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very excited about that. It's been on my heart since about last year, and this year I decided to sit down and figure out the structure of it. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
super super excited for October when I have about 12 to 15 people coming by. We're gonna have a beautiful house in Charlottesville and just spend 2 days reupholstering some really nice pieces, figuring out, or not so much figuring out, but showing them a little bit how I work with creating mood
Mm-hmm.
boards and kind of like putting on their furniture designer hat for a day or so.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'll be really beautiful. Good time. I hope.
Well, right. It would be. Well, let me ask you a question. So the business side of that, like,
Mm,
so even, I want to get to the retreat too, but even for your local classes, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not like doing, let's say, a calligraphy workshop, right? You might be
right,
able to rent a space,
right.
for a
Yeah.
couple of hours. Like, do you have like your own studio? Like, how did you figure that out? Because you have these big pieces of furniture. There's like
Yeah,
wood chips and
right.
everything flying everywhere. Yeah. So I was just
Yes,
curious about how that went.
absolutely. So going back to the um, co-working spaces that DC has, three friends had started a space in Northwest DC called the Lemon Collective.
Oh
And
yeah.
the space was starting out for workshops for instructors who wanted to come and just do a wide range of classes. And they had reached out and asked if I wanted to teach some upholstery workshops. And I had taught a class previously, like years before, at a yoga studio. And it
Mm.
was just like really a test to see what kind of space would I need, how much mess would we be making, like who would even come. So that was just a test.
Right.
And then the first class I had sold out within, I would say, 12 hours, which was wild to me. I was like, what? People are interested in coming out on the weekends to do manual labor?
Right,
Okay.
right.
And so in that space, it's kind of a narrow space, but it worked
Mm,
out really beautifully, and I was able to comfortably host about 5 people.
mm.
And I wanted to keep it to 5 just because it gives me more time to be hands-on with each of them, because everyone's
Mm-hmm.
going to be at different skill levels, everyone's bringing in different styles of chairs, and I also just wanted to get a sense of my own comfort level with teaching. So
Mm-hmm.
I started teaching in that space, and I was teaching out of that space consistently for about a year and a half. And all the classes were sold out, and it was new people each class. And so I figured eventually I would want or need more space to accommodate more people.
Mm,
But my dream to myself is to definitely have my own studio space where it could operate as a workspace for me, a showroom, but also I could host these workshops. It's just
right.
been a little sort of tedious in finding my own space. Spaces in
Mm-hmm.
DC, they exist, but the price points are, all over
Yeah.
the board. And so you're thinking about your rent versus the additional cost of a studio and the expenses and the utilities for that. Um, but what's been wonderful is that there have been such a nice variety of spots where I can reach out to the owner and say, "Hey, is it possible to come by and host a class here?" And everyone has been like, "Yes, come through." My
Right.
friend Megan, I've been hosting out of her space in Brookland called A Creative DC.
Mm.
And then there's another space in Alexandria that I've just started teaching from called AR Workshop. So it's there's been a lot of spaces and opportunities here, but my dream
Oh,
would be to have
cool.
my own space that I can just
One
deck
day.
out and set up the shelving that I need, keep all my tools stationary so I don't have to keep slugging them back and forth
Right.
my
Yeah.
car. So yeah, trying to definitely reduce the workload, on myself and prepping for these classes, and just really have a space that I can set up and call my own.
Yeah, and even for the retreat, like that seems like it would be like a logistical nightmare because it's like, how do you get the furniture out there? Is it already out there? Like,
So yeah, so
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was just like, wow, that just seems like you have to be crazy organized to figure all that
Yeah.
out.
And I love to organize and plan and sort of like break down logistics and how things will work. But for the classes, each attendee brings their own chairs. So people would be,
Mm.
driving their chairs in themselves. And for
Oh,
me,
perfect.
I've already got all of my tools like in a big old bag and a couple of bags. And then I have a fantastic intern named Taylor who is just she's just amazing. I can't say enough great things about her. She's so proactive about helping. And so I'm going to be utilizing her to help set up the workshop and just lay out all the tools and things of that nature. But other than that, it's sort of like plug and play. The house will be set up and each person will come. I'll already have the space opened up for them to just bring their chairs. And, I take care of all the cleanup. And then what's also special about this retreat, the additional thing is I've asked a Black woman massage therapist to come through and give everybody a massage, a 15-minute
Oh,
massage
wow.
at the end of the retreat. Because it's something we joke about a lot in my workshops. People come and they're like, woo, okay, I did not realize how physical this was going to be. My back hurts. You should probably partner with like a massage company, a local massage therapist. And I was like,
Right.
I should do that. So for the retreat, I don't want it to just be labor. Part of retreat is supposed to be rejuvenating and sort of restorative. So I was like,
Right, right.
let's get some massages up in here. Let's send you home in a chill mode.
I know. I'm like
So,
so lazy. I'm definitely on the other end of the spectrum. I'm like, I'll
right?
just buy this chair.
That has been like the sort of indirect effect with the classes is people will come and they'll realize how much work is involved and they're like, okay, look, I have 6 more of these at home. I will not be doing them, so can I enlist your services? So it generates a little business too sometimes, which has been kind of nice.
Right. I appreciate all the work and the
Yes,
love going into it. Yeah.
but I will be having no parts of it. Totally
But
understand.
no, but it seems, I mean, I have a friend who loves to like do that too and thrift. She's in Chicago and it's definitely an art and it's just like so amazing. Like what people who come up with like furniture designers who like I don't know have a brain for that. Like
Mm-hmm.
my creative brain doesn't work in that way, right?
Mm,
But also, I wanted to ask you too, because we have a lot of people listening who like want to start their own businesses, but then they hear like, oh, sometimes it takes like 5 years for you to even become profitable. And that
mm-hmm.
like scares people, I think, away sometimes for like maybe going at something full time or even like part time. People are just like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't even try. And so I
Mm-hmm.
was just gonna ask you, like, how has that been like trying to navigate a business and giving back to
Yeah.
the business and finding that balance.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I feel like I'm still very much trying to do that. Last year, there was a sort of specific way that I worked, but I also was taking on a lot of work because I was saying to myself, okay, if you do a lot now, you build up the profit now, and you never know when things are going to slow down either.
Right.
There was a period a couple of years back when I had some chairs ready for a farmer's market in the summer, and I sold about 90% of the inventory. And then in November, I went back to the same farmer's market and sold nothing. And so I was
Mm.
thinking like, oh, okay, around this time of year, people are not really buying furniture because it's the end of the year, it's towards the holidays. They're, booking plane tickets and going to visit family, getting presents. So last year, I was thinking I would sort of front load the beginning of the year in terms of work, and then I would have, some money that I could ride through the end of the year.
Mm.
And things stayed pretty steady and pretty busy, which was nice. But I was what felt like making money, I was spending so much on the materials, but also just the cost of living.
Mm.
And this year, it's been a lot of reconciling for me and trying to figure out, how hard do I want to work, for the money, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I'm working for all of this or doing all of this work, but then it's going right back into, rent and my car insurance and paying, the seamstress that I work with and paying my intern and just all these other expenses. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to have the balance too of just living life, being able to eat comfortably and
Like going
outfit
on
myself,
vacation.
take
Yeah.
a trip. And I was thinking, like, is it selfish to feel that way that I want to take a vacation when when I have a business? But I was like, no, that's all part of this lifestyle, this way of wanting to work. And I didn't leave a full-time job to, add on more stress for how I was going to work as an entrepreneur and feeling like I couldn't take breaks, feeling like it wasn't a reasonable expectation to, break even or even go, make more than I expected last year. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was shifting that mindset and giving myself permission to be like, yes, you can, work hard, whatever capacity that means for me. That doesn't necessarily mean working all the time on upholstery.
Mm.
It could be, if you're working on a panel, getting paid for that panel or whatever it is, just different ways to
Mm-hmm.
scale. But I have tried to not adopt the mindset of like, all right, entrepreneurship has to be hard. You have to, be struggling. When I first started upholstery, I was broke. Like,
Right.
could not pay my rent, couldn't even afford. Like, I remember I went to McDonald's and I was ordering like a large French fry off the dollar menu, and the total came to $2.12. And I was like, what is this
Wait a
inflation?
minute.
What is happening here? Like, that is how broke I was. And I was just like, I don't want to operate in that mentality, in that mindset going forward. So I've just really tried to create structure for myself. And when it comes to negotiating with clients, my rate is my rate because I know what it costs to live in this city. I know what it's
Mm-hmm.
costing me in terms of labor, in terms of time and expertise. And I recognize my value in that regard. But I also, for myself, have to check myself and be like, okay, you enjoy eating out, but that is a big expense. You can't be doing that
Mm-hmm.
every night of the week. I have to be better about budgeting, about my own sort of constraints. If I don't have, if I'm not eating out 5 times this week, that's like towards a vacation that I can have for myself in 2 months.
Right.
So it's just sort of checks and balances for what I really want, how I want to live. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I was saying, it's so funny that we're having this conversation now because I feel like I'm in this transition period with that, with how I want to work and make a living and earn my money. So,
No, it's like a lot of good things to talk about. I was talking to someone the other day who's starting up a business,
hmm
and I was talking to her about prices, and I was like, "Trust me, take it from me," because I said when I first started out, like even with
hmm
prices, I was like, "Well, I don't know," and then I
hmm
got to the point, and I'm like, nope, it's $5,000 for this website. And if you
right,
don't want it, that's fine. And, I will
yeah,
find, because, I told her I was like, I was losing money, because
exactly.
I wasn't valuing my time.
That's been like a big thing for me is um, when I have a price that I'm pitching out there for a project, it's not arbitrary, you know. In no way am I
Mm-hmm.
trying to just be like, yeah, you know, let me just see if you're willing to pay this. No, it is broken down so that you have an understanding of why this costs what it does. And when,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you have people or a company, whoever it is, that's trying to ask for a bunch and bring it down, that for me is a very clear indicator of, okay, this isn't going to be a good relationship for me to do.
Right.
And I'm not going to be inspired to do that work because I know that I'm being undervalued. Even though, yes, my car still has to be paid, this rent still has to be paid. Um, there are some times, or there have been times for sure, last year where I was making concessions and doing projects that were a lot of work and I wasn't getting much money for that. And
Mm-hmm.
I I felt that so much of being disappointed with myself, of just being unhappy with that project. So it's something I try to be mindful of and not repeat and not work out of a place of like financial desperation. You know, it's like I have to take this project because X, Y. And
Right.
it's so much energy working in that way, so much
It
wasted
will
energy.
drain, like, because I've been there where I've
Yes.
worked on a website where it was like someone, they're like, well, why don't you give me a discount? And I gave them a discount. And then
Right?
every minute you're working on it and every extra thing they're asking for, you're like, I knew I shouldn't have done this. Why did I do it?
Exactly.
I'm like, I could have
Exactly.
I could have put this energy towards emailing people or finding,
Yes.
other ways to make, twice as much money versus now I'm like miserable, but now I'm, in this contract, so
Exactly.
I've got to finish this, right? And it's just like
Exactly.
not even worth it.
Been
Yeah.
there, done that, have no
I know
desire to repeat
exactly.
is not worth it at all. And one of my girlfriends, she's so business savvy and she's wonderful. And she was telling me very early on, she was like, your goal is not to be a factory where you're producing 10 chairs for these different clients. You know, it's not to just get every offer that someone is throwing out to you. It's to be really focused
Mhm.
on, instead of doing 10 projects over the course of a month, you're doing two projects, you know, that give you that
Mhm.
same amount of income. And I was like, yes, let me get into that mindset, you know, to where I'm asking for those rates and comfortable with asking for those rates. Because asking people for money is it's tough. It makes sense because you're asking for a product, you know, a service. Yes, of course, money will be exchanged, but it's also like that game of like double dutch. You know, is this price okay? Like, are you gonna be in? Are we gonna jump in and do this
Right.
together?
Like, what's gonna happen
Um,
here?
yeah, but I working by yourself and knowing you have very real expenses and very real goals for yourself financially um,
Mhm.
will help you to say no more often where you need to, and yes where you need to as well, and just be more discerning.
Yeah.
You know, what is your rate, and you are sticking with it.
And that's it. And even you mentioned, getting paid to be on panels and things like that, because I can even see you doing speaking engagements too and getting paid for that. And then that way it's like you're not always in the shop. You're not, and that
Right.
gives you a reason to get out or travel or whatever, and then also get compensated for it. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
just kind of, I guess, thinking through those type of opportunities. Mm.
absolutely, for sure. Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. Sort of what am I? How am I working? Like, what's motivating my work right now? And I think it is building a life and a sort of a way of working that's not so dependent on the physical labor for my income,
Mhm. Yeah.
because there's so many products and designs that I've had in my sketchbook for months and they've just languished there because, like I was saying, I was focusing on other client work. But there's different ways to scale that are comfortable and that I don't have to physically be present to do those things.
Yeah.
Um, and the business can still grow because the whole like work on a chair, finish that, get paid, then bring in another chair to work on, finish, get paid. That structure is not sustainable. And I recognized that very early on when I was starting. So it's now trying to generate income from my ideas that allow
Right.
flexibility, you know, to dive into deeper projects. And this year my mood has been shoot your shot. I have been pitching wild ideas or seemingly wild ideas that are becoming realities. And there are ways that I can utilize my design chops in a different way besides just working on chairs. I can develop new
Mhm.
products, starting to work with some companies about outfitting whole spaces. So that's
Mm.
really
Wow.
exciting. Yeah.
Yes.
It's just
I
like
know.
tap
I'm
into
like, I feel
all of this.
like a YouTube channel is in your future so we can document all
Okay,
this stuff.
let's
Yeah.
go ahead and speak this. That would be
Right.
fantastic. But yes, it's just seeing myself, I had not previously not seen myself as an entrepreneur or a businesswoman because I didn't have that formal training of like, business school and the logistics, administrative stuff and negotiating contracts. And so I was kind of hesitant to wear that hat. And last year was just, I don't know, I started walking more into that purpose, into that power, and
Hmm.
utilizing the ecosystem of amazing men and women around me who are full time or part time, entrepreneurs, and just
Yeah,
have so many great insights about, yes, you can define business however you want it to be for yourself. It doesn't have to be a certain way that you've seen it. It could be whatever feels good for you. And
absolutely.
that's what I've been doing or trying to do.
Right. Well, I just have a few wrap up questions. Thank you for like
Yeah,
sharing so much information.
of course.
Um, First one is, how do you stay motivated?
hmm Um, I stay motivated through a number of things. I meditate pretty frequently, and I can definitely tell when I'm like haven't meditated in a while, is sort of out of line mentally. I have to come back and just get kind of quiet for a little bit. And I journal a lot. I
Mm,
sketch a lot. I'm always inspired by something around me, like design, fashion, um, a detail in a dress or whatever it is, because those things just spark ideas in my head and I start to sketch an idea. And so even if it's not a chair that I physically have in my space, it's just a reminder to me like, this is part of your spirit. This is a part of who you
mhm.
are and what gets you excited. So whether or not you create this today or next year, it's it's a seed that you've already planted. And so it's just a reminder to me like, this is the space that you should be operating in. I'm motivated by creating work that is not out there yet. There's
Mm,
designs that I have in my brain, and as soon as they're actualized into a chair, I'm excited and I can't wait to share it with everyone. But then it's also like, I'm ready for the next design. I'm ready to create the next thing that my imagination can dream up. So I'm just really motivated by creating new stuff that
mhm.
is fresh, that is feels sort of innovative and unique. And I'm motivated by like being able to have the fluidity to travel, to just live my life
Yeah.
on terms, and live it comfortably and be able to go and see my family whenever I want. They live in Minnesota. And
Mhm.
so it's just being able to work how I want without it feeling like um, an obligation necessarily. And I don't want to make that sound like a selfish way, like, oh, I don't want to have to work or whatever. It's just
Mhm.
being in that space where your designs, your passion and your heart for this work you're doing is allowing you to have this really open, fluid, flexible lifestyle that is,
Mhm.
you can operate in multiple spaces. You can do whatever you want to do so long as you're coming from a place of like sincerity and you're not operating out of like desperation, but sincerely like you love this work. That's what a long way around of what motivates me.
No, that's amazing. And then what's one thing you cannot live without?
Ooh, oh my gosh. I feel like the first thing that came to my mind was Thai coconut milk gelato. It
Oh,
is,
wow. That is
I
very
know it's
specific.
super specific. If you know me, I cannot keep a pint of ice cream in my apartment. Like, I just can't. 2 hours, it is gone. I will sit here and just, I didn't even realize I loved ice cream that much, but I do. And this is like the season to have it right here. Thai coconut
Right,
milk
it is
gelato,
hot.
my stuff. I love it. Just trying to think of something else. It's definitely like food because I'm an eater.
No,
I
that is
love,
perfect.
my gosh, I love to
I,
eat
I will make sure I
anytime.
put it in the show notes, maybe a link to where you can buy some or
Listen, I'm gonna go. They have it at Dolceza, and I'm gonna probably head over there this afternoon and get some because it's just been on my heart.
something.
I love it so much.
And then please just tell the listeners where to find you. And you mentioned a retreat too. So if they're
Yeah,
like, oh my goodness, I want to go to that, please tell them about that too, where they can find
absolutely.
details.
Yes. My website is Nicole Crowder Upholstery.com. Last name is spelled C as in cat, Rowder. And on Instagram, I'm Nicole M. Crowder, M as in Marie, that's my middle name. And I'm on Twitter as well as Nicole Crowder, but mostly you can find me on Instagram and my website. And on the website, there's all the information. There's a tab that says Upholstery Retreat 2018. You can register directly there. But yeah, feel free to send me emails. I'm really diligent about checking my DMs too, because people reach out to me via that as well. So feel free to send me a DM. But those are the places you can find me.
Perfect. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on to the show.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. This has been a retreat to just sit and talk. A retreat. Hello, here we go. A treat to talk about work and life and inspirations. This has been wonderful. So thank you.
How amazing was Nicole? Like, aren't you just like inspired and pumped? And she just gave, I don't know, so many helpful tips, and just her story was just really inspirational. All of the links that we mentioned are in the show notes over at nishesnow.com/62, from the insurance we talked about to Little Fish Accounting, the retreat, definitely learn more about that. But everything, is definitely in there. And really, I hope this helps you think about, you know, how can you live like that intentional lifestyle? And if you're building a business, how can you be more intentional about that? And then, we even discussed being more intentional with your money. And I've talked about that on past episodes too. And, I talked about how, like, even for me, just personally, just getting out of debt. And then because I got out of debt years ago, I'm very intentional with my money, and I'm intentional with like my side hustles, like how I make that money and what kind of money I want to make, and trying to figure that all out. So really, think about how to do that. And towards the end, she talks just a little bit about journaling. And you guys know I'm a big time journaler. So definitely get into that, because it really does allow you to put your thoughts on paper, kind of look back at what you've done, do vision boards, and really kind of think through what you want. You could definitely check out a video that I did on YouTube on, even doing bullet journaling, which I love. If you just go to nishesnow.com/YouTube, you can kind of scroll and find that video. I'll also include it in the show notes, but just kind of like think about that, and ways of journaling, or even meditating, or finding like what works for you, because it really depends on you and your lifestyle. But anywho, thank you for listening. And please, like I mentioned earlier, if you go over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts app, give me a 5-star rating. That'd be greatly appreciated. If you share this episode on social media too, that really, really helps. And remember, you could go and use the code SNOW over at SW Basics. And so until next week, guys, I will catch you later. Have an amazing week. Take care.